Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. I'm delighted to be joined on the podcast today by Mikolaj. Mikolaj, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. That was perfect. Great accent.
Was it?
Yes.
That was only after one practice as well. Well, Mickey's okay, is it?
Yes, yeah, you can call me Mickey.
Perfect. Mickey, how are we doing?
Well, I'm actually at the training ground at the moment. Just finished the session. We're playing tomorrow against Reading.
Okay, perfect. Things been going okay?
Yeah, pretty well, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on. This one's been coming for a long time now. I've been hounding you on social media to try and get you on. So I appreciate you freeing up a bit of time for me. We've got a few different topics to get into, but anyone watching on video will probably see the club that you're at right now. So we can get into that in a second. But can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
So I'm originally from Poland, from a relatively big town in Gdańsk, and I used to play as well to a semi-pro professional level at Lech Gdańsk. For those who follow World Cup in Poland, they used to play games at one of the stadiums as well. And then at some point, obviously because of injury, I don't want to say I was a good football player, but I was shit in football. That's why I went to a different route and started my journey in SNC and rehab. And then at some point, because of actually my brothers moved here early into the UK, had a chance to visit him, and he was already in football. And I thought, oh, I want to be part of this. This is brilliant. Like, just different culture, and so professional, and just different level. And I was looking for opportunity to come down here and start education, and then start my journey at the University of Derby. Did my BSc. Did an internship with Derby County Academy as well, and then worked a bit for game changer performance as well in East Midlands, and then moved to London to do my MSCA at Middlesex University in sports science as well. MSc, and then just looking for the jobs. I started in the lab, and then there's that opportunity came out with the women's team. And then start with the first team, women's team, and under 23s. And then within a year, because of good relation with the head of performance and medicine at the time, who also worked with the academy, and he showed some potential in me, and what I was doing at the time, it worked for us as well. I managed to improve the injury stats and the performance of the players as well. And then got an invitation to support them during the preseason in the academy, and after preseason they offered me a part-time role, and then that changed into full-time at some point. And now I'm predominantly with under 18s as a lead SNC coach at academy. Also had a couple weeks with the first team when I help out there during the pre-seasons, like testing and monitoring some prehab sessions. You had Lee already on the podcast, so yeah, I was helping him. Yeah, that's pretty much about me.
So in terms of time scale, then, Mickey, how long you've been at the club?
So with Watford, it's I think 5 years already, 5 seasons. Oh, so it's going to be my 6th season, yeah.
Okay, awesome, brilliant. Now, I want to discuss your experiences working with different coaches and different sort of cultures, and looking into different leagues and how different clubs prepare. So we were going to discuss some of the differences between the Spanish, Italian, English way or approach to S&C. So what sort of stands out to you when we talk about that? What are the differences?
I think there's always good bits from everyone, and what I'm trying to do always is to talk to people and have a chat about what their experiences got and what they're good at, and just, you know, because I'll be laughing, but people always say that Polish people come here to steal their jobs. So I'm here to steal everyone's ideas, basically. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, that's what I was doing for almost 5 years, basically just talking to people and having that exposure of a Spanish, Italian philosophy, and then English coaches, obviously. And obviously having a background in Poland as well and playing football, and maybe a bit different approach, maybe a bit more old school, less scientific. Obviously, times changing, and now they're different position to what I experienced as a player. But just picking up stuff in terms of, let's say, the football conditioning or periodization, some bits from Spanish and Portuguese coaches, and then in terms of, like, let's say, the SNC bit in the gym, I think the whole organization, from my perspective, and the structure is pretty high standard in the UK. That's something that every league could learn from Premier League, in terms of the backroom staff, the organization, the medical structure, sports science, SNC, and rehab side of it. I think this is very, very developed. And then also just borrowing stuff from different disciplines, and practitioners coming here to present to the UK. And I think this was very, very good for me. And then in terms of the progress and the learning, that I think it was actually a massive progression, because I had a chance to listen to people that works at the top level from all over the world, and just picking the bits and trying to implement in our program and what we're doing here in Academy.
I think any coach worth anything at all will fully admit that a lot of the work that they do is stolen or slightly borrowed from other coaches, isn't it? And that's how we have to go about it, because getting exposure to different practices, different coaches, different ways of working is really important, isn't it, to inform what you do on a daily basis. But with those experiences in mind, how has that informed what you do? How has that developed you as a coach? And I suppose tying on to that, how would you define your approach, your philosophy off the back of that?
I think because when you started, I mean, at least that was my opinion. I thought already after university that, I was clever and I knew everything. And then obviously you realize when you go into a professional environment that, you have to work with people, and sometimes what you put on paper doesn't work. And you have to adapt based to different styles or people's backgrounds. Obviously, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just provide the best service to the players. And sometimes, you might disagree with the philosophy or the methods that have been used, but you just have to give them some time to maybe, okay, let's try it. Maybe that's something new. Maybe you will see some improvements in the performance, or maybe injury numbers. And then, or maybe there's some research that haven't been translated into English that I haven't read, and maybe they've got something that that was something in Spain or Portugal or Italy that we don't know about. And I always try to first check, because if I don't know about something, I can't really have an opinion. Or I can have an opinion, but it's not a very informed opinion. So I usually try to speak to people, ask them for research, then go back, okay, I've got a bit more understanding about it, and then go and see what they're doing. So like with our first team, for example, something new that I never seen before was the Versa Police or isonotional technology that's been used extensively by one of the head performances. And obviously that philosophy we're changing based on whoever came into the club. Some of them might use more traditional strength training. Obviously, you obviously look at the players as well, and some of them wants more traditional strength training. Some of them are more keen towards the Versa Police stuff, because obviously the massive difference in terms of how big the squad is, and obviously you've got players from different backgrounds. Some of them coming from South America, some from Spain, some from Italy, France. And they got just different background. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what methodology you're going to use, is the performance on Saturday, and whether they're going to win or not. So it's just adapting those styles to that we're going to suit to the philosophy of the head coach and also the players they're working with. And in academy, obviously, we've got a bit more. We've got a freedom in terms of what methods we can pick, but there is a certain structure to it, and we're trying to develop the players. So we're using those that actually we know that works, and the basics that are pretty good, but they're not really fancy. But there's always a space for trying new things. If you let's say if you had someone talking about certain, like a new idea, maybe we can put this in, or maybe we can slightly change the program of one of the players and we will see a bigger improvement. And that was something that I had an opportunity to try within the rehab space with players, and then implement it into the whole team based on case study with just one player. And then most of the times it actually work, and most of the time it actually players benefit from it. Sorry, that's the light. Yeah, just trying different philosophy. Every conference I went to had something new for me, and I remember after, let's say, working with one of head coaches and having maybe not like the relationship was really tough, and then obviously they had different ideas in terms of what you'd like to do. I had some ideas they want to implement, and sometimes it wasn't working. I went to a conference and listened to one of the guys that used to work at Manchester United, and he used to be an SNC, but he's now a football coach. And he said, like, you know, sometimes you believe that this is the only method that you should be using in your approach, but actually, based on his experience and what he said in this talk, he said, like, well, we've been doing this and it doesn't make any sense from an SNC perspective, and everyone probably in this room would disagree with it, but actually we're winning titles, and that's what matters the most. Yeah.
No, it's interesting that the sort of phrase that comes to mind for me is, I think it's strong views or strong opinions loosely held. So you have the philosophy, don't you? But then you're also open-minded enough to see something and get into a discussion on why someone does it. And it's a result. A first team environment's a results game, isn't it? Obviously, academy a little bit different, a little bit more around development and education of players. They're maybe not, like you're talking there about players coming in from different leagues and different backgrounds, different cultures that I'm sure you learn a lot from.
Yeah, we obviously, because of the age, we've got less diversity within the squad. Most of the boys are, also because of England's coming out from the European Union. There's more English boys in our academy, and that's obviously someone who grown up here. But most of the players are raised and born here in the UK, so obviously a bit different issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis than, say, first team, who's got a bit more diversity within the squad.
How have you found that as an experience, though, when you have got a player from a different background, maybe when they're coming in? Because you talked about the approach that we take over here to S&C, it being quite established. Players are generally now pretty used to having gym work as like a big rock in their preparation, whereas there's probably a lot of other countries and cultures that don't have that. So have you had much experience of players coming in from that sort of background where you've had to educate, but you're also trying to fit them into a squad environment that a lot of people are used to it?
I think so. Before, obviously, because we had players coming from abroad as well, but most places, they were kind of used to that gym culture, and they were actually pretty good with it. Obviously, different gym history. But let's say whenever we had actually players from Spain, not many actually had a gym history. But I think now it's changed because of the conference that Barcelona puts on. People are going there, and obviously you got massive opportunity to network with others. And I think that kind of leads into that exchange of knowledge. Okay, this is what we do in academy, and they also start to think, okay, maybe we could change something and do it differently. I'm not sure how it is in terms of, obviously, I'm not saying that it's everywhere in Spain, but obviously you got some players who probably didn't have that exposure. I've heard in Barcelona, for example, they do it differently, which is fine. Like, nothing wrong about it. Probably on different clubs, they got a proper gym access, and they do it differently as well. But that was something I noticed when we had players from Spain. And then they usually also use very light weights, or a bit scared about lifting.
So and with that in mind, Mickey, like what would be your approach to that? Because obviously everyone would be a little bit different. I know some coaches would probably try and push their approach quite heavily in that instance, or would it be a case of sort of meeting them where they're at and seeing what they've done?
I think obviously when they're coming in and when they're trialing with us, it's just a time about get to know them. Obviously, we usually try to ask them some questions about their history in terms of injuries and the medical side of it, and also the S&C history and what they've been doing before. If they haven't, then we'll just put a simple program for them and then see whether they understand anything. But most of the time, there's no issues. They will just like get on with it and do what they have to do because the whole group is doing that, gym or a similar program. So there's no issues. I think that the younger age group, they a bit more open, obviously because they're also in a new environment. So they're keen to learn and try. Whereas obviously you've been going through the whole academy. I think that the whole thing would change because at some point in every club in Europe, you would have probably most of the players experiencing similar philosophies or similar content in terms of the methods they use in the program. So it's not going to be a massive difference. And at the end of the day, it's more about the application and how the player works rather than the methods that we all use.
Yeah, 100%. You talked before about some of the results that you've had within the programming. So I want to get into that a little bit, starting with the women's team. So what have been some factors that you've put in place or things that you've additions that you've made possibly, and what have been some of the biggest results off the back of that?
I think because I was quite naive, when someone's telling you can't do it, I always think I can. So one of the things that was massive at the time, because everyone's talking about it, when I was going into movement school, was about the ACL injuries. So I think the season before, we had like 2 to 4 ACLs. And then, so I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be the first one who was going to prevent it. And I mean, I'm not saying obviously that it was down to me, but we had a brilliant MDT team, including the coaches. Everyone was open, but we had across those 4 years that I was working with the women's team, we had no ACL at all. And we had players coming into a club with ACL or maybe rehabbing, and we just put the care around the players, the program, and obviously the communication was brilliant. And the coaches were co-open to listen to what I had to say. And sometimes, obviously, if they thought that, we could push them a bit more, then they would challenge what I was saying. And then the well-being stuff that we use also, and the openness of the staff to listen to the players that help, because sometimes when the players were coming in and reporting things, we would listen to it and we'll take them on board and just modify them sometimes. So that created that great culture and their relationship with the players. And also, obviously, I sometimes probably knew a bit more from the players than the coaches, and I could sometimes speak to the coaches and say, listen, maybe that's not the best. Because when we actually talking about the sessions and they were talking about what they want to do on that day, I would think, okay, maybe this is not the best for this player today based on what she reported. So can you maybe swap the positions, or maybe she could do maybe half of the drill, or maybe join in later on in this drill. And they were fine with it. And it was just a way of working, because at the time they were not full-time but part-time. So obviously you have to account for the fact that most of them working the whole day and then going into a training session at very late at 8 o'clock. So, they will struggle to eat, and obviously they will finish late as well and might struggle to fall asleep. So I think that was a good experience. And again, I think it was down to a good relationships, and that's something that we built, and openness with the coaches. And then some mentors that I had around, people who would challenge me with regards to the stuff that I was doing.
I think that's super important, isn't it? Having that cohesive MDT and the openness to challenge like that in a good way is definitely important. What other factors do you feel that you put in place that really impacted that? Because obviously that's quite a change, isn't it, to go across those seasons and not have an ACL?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was anything like very complicated. It was simple stuff around the pre-activation stuff that was just pre the warm-up. So because I would usually have a half an hour with them, and then some of them would come earlier, so I would do a gym stuff as well, like very light sessions focused around movement quality with a bit of, let's say, power, speed-based stuff. And then within the warm-up, we'll work on, strength. It would be, because some of them obviously wouldn't have time to come earlier because of the work commitment. So I would just do simple stuff around dynamic stretching that you call, and obviously you would do a body weight movement that you could call so a strength for those who haven't got a gym exposure or haven't got any gym experience. And I was always fighting for extra, even getting an hour of the gym within the week. That happened obviously later on, and we see a massive improvement in terms of performance and even the response after those gym sessions in terms of soreness and like, let's say, some soft tissue injuries. We didn't have many, but that just improved everything. We even having an hour within the week for the players to do it. And yeah, everything was around that pre-activation sessions, the warm-up, and then speed development. But because of only having a limited amount of time, I only focus on speed development. So like, let's say max V or accelerations, but because I thought obviously they're going into a session and they will be able to work more, like develop, let's say, the agility or the more specific change direction movements through the game. So I didn't really want to spend too much time on that because of, say, we got limited time. So let's just maybe try to improve that through the games and then focus on, let's say, acceleration and speed by doing isolated stuff. And that seems also to work very much. And working through preseason and progressing that, we managed to create 30 chances and players would outrun and outsprint the opposition, because our goal was to get promotion into a championship at the time. Yeah, simple solutions within the environment I was at that time, and just focusing around like basic neuromuscular control, plyometrics, some motor control, like simple body weight movement within the gym, and the mobility, and which they always appreciate, because like, oh, I'm feeling so tired after the whole day of work. So we just work on mobility for 10-15 minutes, implementing some, let's say, body weight movement as well, and that felt very good into going into a session. So things like that, but just basically on players' feedback, listening to what they need, and then what I thought we needed as well, and then just combining it all together and getting the feedback at the end of the season, so thinking what else we can add. And always the main topic was nutrition, which with our budget, something didn't help, and obviously stoppages at the petrol stations, where sometimes you struggle to find let's say, healthy options. I mean, it's probably better now than it was before, but yeah.
Brilliant. And then what about over on the boys' side? So we just talked there about the impact on the women's side, but in terms of the boys' side, what was some of the big standouts, the big results on that side?
I think it was around the rehab side of it, and then one addition probably focused on was a speed development as well, after obviously COVID, and listening to many talks and people just changing the philosophy around the gym. I was trying to combine different philosophies from people from rugby, track and field, and then martial arts, and just seeing what else, how that's going to make the program better, and then just implement things into our microcycle. And then that was quite a big learning for me, because in terms of strength and being very robust, I think rugby players, great example. Obviously, football players are much weaker. I'm not saying that you have to be like a rugby player, but I think there's loads of lessons from rugby coaches or S&C that you can take. And then in terms of speed, you're looking at obviously track and field. What are those top guys doing, and how we can modify or add stuff into our training program. And I look at Altis and Stuart McNeil, and I also had a chance to do an internship with Jonas and learn a lot from him, in terms of endurance, like Martin Boucher stuff, obviously, and then also look at like ultra endurance people, or those people who work on the speed side, and see what are we doing in terms of the conditioning side will influence the speed as well, because I wanted to find a way of working multiply like, so let's say let's call them biomatter abilities at the same time, and then I was trying to find out whether we can work on power, strength, and hypertrophy in some cases, and then there's speed, and what's the right dose that we can put in the program with the players. And rehab was brilliant, because you don't have to listen to the coach. You only have to work with the medical team and other S&C or physios, and then put the program for the player. And then obviously towards the end of the rehab, you starting to implement more football specific stuff and then talking to the coaches. Obviously always interested to find out what they're doing, but there's a place for introducing speed early in the rehab where that is going to benefit the player later on. So that was a massive learning curve for me, and then also benefit the players that were injured at the time, because when they came back, everyone was like, "Oh, what have you done with him? He looks brilliant, and he can run, he can sprint, and he's so strong as well, and look athletic." And that's only with like 6 to 8 weeks. But you got that player one-to-one. You can coach him. You can put some educational materials for him. Whatever he asks you for, you're there for him, because obviously he wants to come back as quickly as possible. And then just basically trying new things based on what I've read, listened to, and the people I spoke, and then see whether that's making the player better, and whether when they transition back into a training, they can maintain that performance and they're still progressing.
And just on that rehab side of things, how much does data inform what you do?
I do use data, but I prefer common sense. So obviously, as a player back then, we only had certain reps, and sometimes we use heart rate monitors. Obviously, it's good to have a data to back up your decision sometimes when you're not sure about things. But by working with, at the time, he was my mentor, and he was 30 to 40. He already had like 30 to 40 years of experience. I'm talking about the head of medical at the time. And he would assess the player and tell me, listen, this is what I want him. Obviously, we would have a framework and a long-term plan to work from. But he would tell me, this is what he can do today based on what my assessment. And obviously, I would listen to him because, he's done so many rehabs that he knows what the players are able probably to tolerate on that day. So then, okay, I would create a plan. Okay, this is what I think we can do based on what you said. And this is the things that I might think about probably, adding into the top program if you're okay with it, just to challenge whether, we can progress him further. And it was like, okay, do this first and see whether he's responding well. And then based on that, we'll progress. Obviously, we didn't have live data at the time. So it would be more based on, just certain reps and distances of pitch lengths, just to calculate potentially what the players go. And I remember, when obviously I didn't find the answer. I'm not sure whether that's right or wrong, but you look at the graphs and they're all nice. But at the time when I was doing and trying to find new solutions and probably push the players a bit more, I had a player doing 4,500 K of high speed running. Okay, someone could say, oh, that's too much, but that's purely because we've done some isolated stuff. So obviously that was with some more work as well in football specific drills, but some of it was through some isolated work. And if I speak to the player, he was fine after the training session. And after that, you would go and say into, obviously there was a progression into it, would start probably at 6, 1K or 2.5 because of the intensity of those drills done early on in rehab. And he would reach his PBs in terms of max speed pretty much every session. And he would recover really well. There would be no soreness, no issues around hammies. He felt like, like a machine. We built a great capacity around his calves, hamstrings, groin and other muscles. And he was just flying. And when he came back, he was the same on the pitch. He was just a different player. That's why, obviously, there's one side of, being informed by the numbers, but I don't like to be led by them. And I like to check things if I'm not sure, but there is a simple way of progressing things in a simple way that probably makes sense to everyone, and you don't need numbers to inform those decisions, especially with the clubs where there's less technology, and that's why I had to develop at the time, because sometimes we didn't have access to their monitoring or assessment tools, because it was not enough staff as well sometimes. So we have to find a quick, simple solutions. And that's something that worked, and players came back and had no issues as well.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. With that in mind, like obviously that's a huge part of data, I suppose, in itself, isn't it? Those conversations with a player and discussing their reactions after hard days like that. Have you had experience with, obviously there's going to be players that fits perfectly for, because they're going to give you a lot of feedback, they're going to be really honest with you. Have you had the opposite of that, where players maybe...
So obviously you've got players with a bit different mindset, and with some you can probably do a bit more isolated stuff and they are right with just running, but some of them will just moan about, oh, why I'm not doing stuff with the ball. So obviously there's a way of working with both guys, and I was always keen to, okay, let me think about it and I'll come up with drills that will be, let's say, position specific to a point, and also hit those targets that we want to do, and also make you better from the physical point of view. So there were some that I couldn't put together if they had, let's say, a similar injuries or a similar phase in terms of the rehabilitation, because sometimes because of limitations in terms of the staff numbers, you might have to take two players that are similar stage but different injuries, and they might have a different gym programs, but in terms of the pitch side, they probably at the same stage. So yeah, you had to come up with different drills, and that was something different I had to learn as well. I wanted to say something, but I forgot what was it.
Well, I was just going to say on that, because it does come down to the personality of the player, doesn't it, and how open they are. Because if they're giving you that feedback and they're not answering the questions that you're putting across to them, it's very important, isn't it? And I suppose that's where data can come into things a little bit more. Whereas when you're talking about that environment, I'm guessing that player was very interactive, you had a good relationship with them, and then data's just sort of backed up what you were doing.
Definitely.
So,
and also, because of my background, obviously we were doing a lot of stupid stuff back then when I was training, and we do crazy trainings. Like, probably if you speak to some of the coaches that been in the Premier League maybe 10, 15 years ago, they would go through the same methods. And that's why we used to do as a young player back in Poland in terms of conditioning. So when someone's telling me based on numbers, because we didn't have numbers back then, that the players can't do it. I mean, everyone here is a human being. So if I was able to do it 10, 15 years ago, I can definitely, the limits are higher than what we think they are. It's just about the progressive overload and, building that player to be able to withstand those loads anyway. And not just, microdosing them or just managing all the time, which I don't like. I think by looking at some of the philosophy that, see if you go to clubs, some of them I really like because of how challenging they are for the players, and even speaking to my brother when he's at Leeds at the moment, and his experience, obviously the philosophy is Bielsa and how intense they were. Obviously you can push the players, and if they believe in something, they obviously gonna go with it. So there is the other side, and we just had a chat with Carly Grims, Paralympian, and the stuff she went through is just a powerful message to the boys. No funding. The only thing she had, it was just upper body, and she was training 3-4 hours. So sometimes it might be very, very tough, but it's about the mindset and how hard you can go, and how hard do you want it to be a footballer, because you might not understand what it takes to be a professional footballer. Obviously, a lot of those players might be released at some point, and it's just the nature of the industry that we are in. But if you give 100% from yourself, you've got a better chance of being in that 0.01%.
It's also just digging out, because I'm sure you've experienced it as well as many others, that you just have a few freaks of nature in squads, don't you? It just takes so much pounding on the body and not react the same way as many others. So it's discovering those as well, isn't it?
And there's actually, I remember about one of the keepers, and I was embarrassed by it because he smashed our speed testing. He was the quickest in team, and then our keeping coach said, suck this and you see I'm the best in the academy. Obviously, because of the amount of volume he's done with them, and because he got less volume and the amount of plyometrics they've done it, obviously he was quite springy. He wasn't the strongest in the gym, but he was quick.
Yeah,
obviously different profiles. And now that's why I was thinking, okay, maybe with some players we actually don't have to we don't have to do certain stuff, and they might benefit from different things depending on the profile that they are.
There's definitely lessons in there somewhere, isn't there?
And that was the case with him. He wasn't the strongest, but he was the quickest, and he was pretty agile for his position as a goalkeeper as well. And that's probably what you want. He could save you games as well. So yeah,
brilliant. Ricky, I want to move on to some of the quick fires that we finished the podcast with. So first one being, you've mentioned a few names of people already that you've sort of taken quite a bit of influence from, but are there any others, or you can repeat the same sort of names, but who have been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
I mean, recently, I think it was Brown Downey, because of, let's say, the chats I had with him. I feel like he was my, a very old friend, despite the fact that we actually never met together. So yeah, just having those chats, I think in terms of like being able to listen to my issues that I had, it's just unbelievable person, and I'll be forever grateful for the chats we had. And then recently Dan House as well, I had a chat with him. Obviously there's loads of people that I'm quite thankful for the experiences and the knowledge that they've shared. And there's loads of names because of the materials and educational resources that they shared with me. And then some people that probably not with us anymore, and through the books that I've read, they were very promotional as well. Jonas as well. He was a massive influence for me. And then the head of performance as well that I had a chance to work with. He's not at the club anymore, but his health is not great as well at the time. So yeah, there's someone that kind of was always there to challenge me and listen, and I will never forget that. And then in terms of like a general stuff, I would say people who create, like for example, Robert Pacey, he is doing a great stuff with his platform and the stuff that he shares. You, Ben, as well, with a podcast and bring guests from different backgrounds. It's just, I think even if, because I don't consider myself an expert, but even if you got something to say and it's a different opinion, different experience, there's always something into it that you can if, let's say, if you look at them, let's say this is not an art, right? It's a stadium, but if you look at a picture, and obviously if you will talk to the artist, you will notice different things, but personally I will have a different opinion, different experience about it, but it still doesn't mean that it's got less of a meaning. It's just maybe not as deep as someone who was in that industry or in that role.
Yeah,
it's a bit like zooming out and seeing maybe less details, but maybe a different perspective. So I always look for different experiences and different people to share that with. And I think that's how I change, because when I'm going to conferences now, I'm not going to listen to presentations. That's not, because most of them is just similar stuff and everyone's pretty much talking about the same things, just different context within their clubs. It's more about listening to that personal stories that people have got to tell you, and the issues that they've been dealing with on a daily basis, because you can't get that. Sometimes if you look at the presentation, everyone's trying to make a very good impression about what they do in the club, but actually that's not real life. We know that there is something behind it, and always, you might try to show that perfect program, but that's not the case, because we are working with humans, and sometimes they go a bad day, or you might have a disagreement with the coach or somewhere else within the club or department, and the perfect what is up there on the you see that on the display, but actually what's behind it, the closed doors, and actually speak to the person by their experiences, is actually more to it. So I prefer to just talk to people, and actually sometimes you might hear about things that are not published, that someone's working on, and it's very interesting, especially those people at the top who are, director of performance or even someone who's starting their career and is very curious about a certain topic, that you might have something to share with you, because he's very invested in that specific area of let's say sports science, SME, or whatever industry we're talking about.
I always say that on the podcast to the guests, like, give your story, because I think there's so much more power in that. We can talk about the technical side of the job, and there's going to be a few little intricacies that we might be able to take from each other, but overall a lot of people are doing very similar work, aren't they? And I think you're right, like getting the personal story and that personal side of each person's career, that's where you can learn the most lessons. So no, I fully agree. Mickey, what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
I would say I'm very adaptable.
Yeah.
Because of the industry we're in, obviously with the surprises on the daily reality of working in a football club. You might set up something and in 5 minutes like, oh, sorry, we changed the plan because of this and that happened. So that's probably one of my strengths, and obviously curiosity to just I always want to be the best in what I'm doing, so trying to find out about new methods and people who are the best in what they're doing, and to learn from them. I'm usually very quiet, so I'd rather let others talk and listen to what they've got to say, and then pick some stuff from them. If I think I've got enough experience and I've used some stuff, then I might try to say something. But that's probably it. And then curiosity in terms of learning new cultures, new languages as well. And I think that kind of also influences the way you think, because as soon as you go to a different country, the way you express yourself is different to the way you would express yourself in your own language. So I don't know how to put it in, but obviously I don't want to sound like I'm a psychopath, but it's basically you will be different in a different language. In some languages, you might be more confident. You might feel like you're a bit more truthful, and you feel a bit more happier by the way you express yourself in that language. In some languages, like we all sound when you talk to a Polish, Ukrainian, or Russian person, they sound very cold, or like a strong person, or maybe sometimes become rude because of the background. But I guess it depending on the background as well, the person, and that's where when you've got someone coming in from a different country, because I've been in the position where I was lost and obviously didn't know what to do when I came here at the beginning. I was trying to reach out to different people, and obviously there was a lot of good people that wanted to help me out and be successful as well. And they would have different experiences. Let's say with Polish people, obviously there's a lot of stereotype, and some of the experiences were very tough for me. And at the beginning, I was trying to learn the accent as well. Obviously, I still got accent, but it was more to kind of, that maybe sound bad, but I don't want to fit into a community or the work, because that doesn't make sense to. But sometimes to get rid of certain maybe unpleasant situations, you don't want to experience it, because you want to be able to focus on what you want to do here. And obviously because of your background, sometimes that people doesn't like it or whatever. So
yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. I think it's a great indication and sort of insight into your story, isn't it? Like what we just touched on, like some of the things that you've gone through. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of coaches as well in a similar sort of position. Like I was actually having a conversation yesterday that as English, British people, we get quite lazy with languages. We don't bother to learn, and like me myself fit into that category, and I couldn't relate to what you're talking about, because we've not gone out, educated ourselves, put ourselves in position, or me personally, I know other people have. So no, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that relate to that as well. Mickey, the other question I ask is in terms of advice for yourself? So if you were to go back 5, 6, maybe 7 years before you got the job at the club, what would be your top bit of career advice for yourself?
I think because I've tried to immerse myself probably too much into the S&C sports science stuff, and I probably forgot about the life as well. So having a better balance in terms of, because at some point you find yourself in a difficult position where, a lot of your friends just moved into different things because you were so focused on certain stuff that, the people that were your friends maybe are not your friends anymore, because those who are true friends, obviously they will be always there, but those that you thought would be there, they're no longer there because, obviously you decided that, this is what you're going to focus on. And I'm not saying that that was a bad thing, but I think having that better balance, and now when I'm looking at probably also that they're going to implement, not when we speak to the players and educate them about this, sleep and nutrition and having the balance between what you're doing here and what you're doing out there. I think that's also important for us as practitioners to just keep ourselves healthy with a relatively good mental health and having a mind and still in a game, because you can get to a point where you're just going to bail yourself out and you feel like, oh, this is probably no longer for me because I'm not feeling it, and I'm feeling like there's loads of pressure comes from different places, whereas you could probably prevent that by just actually taking care of it early on. And I think what I think it's Josh doing it at the moment with what Dan as well, Collaborate Sports, and just actually talking about it. It's pretty good, because obviously we've got loads of pressure from the clubs, and I think with the head of performance who came in as well to our club, he was quite good in terms of trying to find that balance between the work and also the normal life, and he understands it. So he put less pressure on that, and he wants us to be humans as well. And obviously he knows that we've got partners, so that's something that I think is key.
100%. Yeah, I fully agree with that. And anyone's not listened to the podcast with Dan and also Josh and John Noonan, and just checking out their work, I think some of the stuff from that is just around your values, isn't it? Like when they talk about defining personal and professional values, again, myself talking from my perspective, that's not necessarily a question that I've answered before, honestly. So I think it's really important for coaches to put that to themselves and start thinking about that, isn't it? It's a really key question.
I remember when I was starting, and I'll do the uni and then go into an internship and go and work, and the whole day basically was around like just this. It was a tough time, but I would be proud for not sleeping, and maybe sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night. And I'm thinking, this was stupid. Like, how could you do that to yourself? Because after a year, I would forget everyone's name. So I feel like, oh, this is wrong. Like I'm not sure what's going on, but I would have a conversation with someone, and then straight after a minute I'll forget what I was talking about. Yeah. And I couldn't do anything about it because I was not sleeping. So I got to a state where obviously I was still living, and I was like, oh, I probably pushed myself to. It would be a great case study to see where I was in terms of my biomarkers and stuff like that. But obviously I didn't have enough sleep, and I think I get to a point where it was around Christmas time. I went up north to see my brother and his family, and I would not sleep for 2 days. I was thinking, what is going on with me? Like, this is not normal. I need to change it. And it basically what happened was like I was just pushing myself to reach something, but it wasn't healthy. And now I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to get to this point. Obviously, you're aspiring to get to a place where it's, in a way, it was a dream for me. At some point I realized maybe it could be a goal. It doesn't have to be a dream. But it's just crazy amount of hours where you're working for different jobs. You got uni, and then you just cycling from place to place. Despite the exhaustion, you feel like, oh, I'm going to do it one day. It will come. And when it finally comes, it's like, okay, now what can I do to make it better? To get more sleep, and because of that, also I've lost some relationships because people say things to me and I would forget about it, or I'll feel very bad about going to my friends and I would not remember their names. I'm like, this is crazy. And then some of my friends actually said to me, listen, there's something wrong with you because you're looking like you keep checking around things. So I think at the time my body was already like in this phase where like constantly alert. Obviously there is a danger coming because I wasn't sleeping. So I was probably not in the best condition. And they said to me, like, you look, there's something wrong with you because you keep looking around, like, you're looking for something to happen or there's something dangerous going on. I was like, okay, that's good that you're saying to me, because I thought everything's okay. Like, obviously I'm not sleeping normally, but so that's something that, obviously when we talk to the players and you think that that's going to have a massive impact on the, let's say, injury risk. Maybe that's the case, but obviously, actually, I was training hard and I was doing other stuff, and I never had an injury because I was listening to my body. So I knew when I had to go and maybe forget about something, I'll just go to sleep, or maybe I would drop the intensity of things that I was doing. Obviously, I'm not elite athlete, more like a recreational one now, but it was still something, that I had an ability to listen to my body. And I think that's something that is important also for the players to consider, and something that we should be educating them, so they got that skill at the end, and when they go in transition to the first team, they can actually take care of themselves with whether it's around nutrition, sleep, and recovery, or maybe just modifying the training where obviously you've got a plan, but sometimes it's worth modifying it regardless of what you plan.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's so important. I think the other way of looking at it is, if we saw players treating themselves in that kind of way that a lot of coaches will, we'd act on it, or we'd at least give some sort of advice, wouldn't we, in that scenario? Same with a friend. And I suppose that's what people have done in your situation. It's, there'll be a lot of coaches that, if they're truthful with themselves, will resonate with that. Which is why the work that Josh and Dan and John are doing is so valuable, I think, because it's just really pulling on awareness for that side on coach health. Mickey, just final thing is around CPD. Like, what is your approach to CPD? How do you go about continually progressing as a practitioner?
So before, I would say I would go to everything that you had in place. I'm like, I've heard about this guy from podcast. This guy wrote this paper. I'm like, I want to go and see him. And then literally, I would just go to everything that you had. If it was free, it's even better. If I had money, then I would go and pay for it. Sometimes I would just ask if there's something that I could do for that person, and go and attend for free. Most of the time, because at the time I was working, it was pretty flexible, so I could actually listen to podcasts. So every day I would actually sit down and listen to Pacey Performance or your podcast or any other podcast that was out there. If there was someone that I was interested in because he was doing this type of training, this type of this he had experience in this area of research or science, or maybe some business stuff or personal development, I would listen to that person. When I had obviously more time to do more studying, I would read books. And the people, I've got a pretty big library now. Like, people just think I'm crazy because I spent some time reading those books, and I just thought, like, if I'm going to make it, I need to invest in myself. And then that was the way. But now my approach changed, and I rather actually talk to people. And if there is someone there, let's say if I got a problem with something, I will try to find a podcast first or a book around this topic. And then once I read that, then I'll go to the person. And if I haven't found a solution yet within that book or podcast, or whether they haven't mentioned what I was looking for, then I might just contact them, or I might just look for more from somewhere else. And that's how I work. Or I'll just speak to my friends that work in, let's say, different leagues, and they got a different philosophy. Because obviously through work here in Watford, I met a lot of people from different countries, and obviously we had a chance to, through going into conferences, also meet some other people. So that's how I do it. I think now I probably will look into more stuff around leadership or reflective stuff, and probably business as well. That's why I'm interested, because I'm at that stage where, you know, I'm thinking about what's next, what will be the next step for me, and how I can, you know, potentially make myself better, and then maybe some mentoring as well, but that will be depending on, you know, what will happen in the future.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's definitely the case. Like where you focus your energy and your reading and your study on does change and progress, doesn't it, over your career, on what you sort of focus on, which is funny. But I agree with what you were talking about before as well, like clocking up those hours, even though it seems silly now, and getting the nights with no sleep and all the rest of it. At a time in your career, you do just have to be that sponge, don't you? You have to go around and just take in as much as possible.
Yeah.
But when you start to progress, that's when you've got to be more, you've got to take more of that sniper approach and really decide on what we're going to do, what's going to be most efficient with your time as well. So, no, Mickey, that was absolutely quality, mate. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Just before I let you go, I need a prediction on the World Cup. Who's going to win it?
Okay, I would say Poland and England in the final.
Oh, yeah, there we go. There we go. Well, we are recording this just after Argentina have been beaten as well, so that's why we're beaten. So yeah, all right. Poland England final. Don't know if that can happen, can it? But
no, definitely not. I mean, I hope England will do well. I think in terms of Poland, I'm not sure about, you know, if they turn up, then we'll do well. And then for me, I haven't seen Brazil yet, but hopefully Brazil can do well as well.
I think everyone's
with
waiting.
The squad they got. Yeah,
everyone's waiting to see them, aren't they? See if they live up to expectation. But no, Mickey, top man, thank you very much for coming on, mate. If anyone wants to reach out to you, by the way, with questions or just get into a conversation about anything that we've touched on, where would you direct them to go?
So on Twitter, I think it's Pujdak Mickey. And you can also find me on Instagram. It's Mickey Pujdak, or I've got also a business site which is called Science Plus Football, and you can check that out as well.
Top man. Thank you very much for your time, Mickey.
Cheers. Thank you very much.